Good evening, everyone. Post NFL draft celebration here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Sunday night, every Sunday night at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, I will be here to take your calls. Every Sunday night at 10 o'clock Eastern Time for the foreseeable future. So this is the one commitment I have to do live streams each and every week, but you know better than that. We go live almost every day. We just concluded back-to-back Miami Hurricanes live streams on Friday and Saturday. Ohio State Buckeyes live on Friday as well. This is the night, though, that you get to call in, talk directly to me. This is what I enjoy more than anything else. This is it right here. This is what I enjoy about doing this channel more than anything else, is talking to you on the phone line and discussing, debating college football. So, like, comment, share the videos out there on social media, and subscribe right here to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. If you love what we do, even if you just like what we do, or at least admire to a certain extent the attempt that we make to cover college football, please like the videos. It's crucial here to anybody that's on YouTube. So anyone that you support on YouTube, please like their videos, including myself. Again, here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, we will be running through the live chat, and also I will be taking your phone calls. There's the number, 860-325-3687. The one topic that I wanted to address tonight, in addition to anything that you bring to the table, would be SEC dominance. Dominance is a strong word. Dominance means just that, dominant, not necessarily just the best, or after we analyze and really dig into it and discuss and debate and pour through the numbers, we figure out, okay, they are barely the best. They have 51% of the market share and somebody else has 49%. No, what it means is dominance, means clearly the best, meaning that there is no question. There is no question. We debate conference supremacy here on a regular basis, and a number of you call in and comment, most notably from the Big Ten, because the Big Ten would be the one conference that would have some argument. And we'll dive into the numbers. We'll dive into the debate and the discussion angles on this one. SEC dominance. And I think it's a relevant discussion point considering the numbers and the results that we saw at this weekend's NFL draft. And now, to many of you, the results at the NFL draft may mean absolutely nothing. And I understand that argument, and we'll get to that as well. Anytime we discuss college football greatness, college football legacy, we can, or we may choose not to, include the NFL piece in that. So we will discuss that tonight. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
And the big Navy Thomas 8.
There he is.
Jumping right on top of you on this subject about the SEC with their, they play weak schedule FCAs, and then they play conference, and then at the end of the seasoning, as it goes down, they go back to the FCS. This thing just makes me want to puke.
All right.
So I just wanted to throw back out at you and let you go with it.
Tom, you know you've come to the right place, though, because you know that I will respectfully challenge you if that's what it is. So we've had these discussions throughout the years on a number of levels with a number of teams, a number of angles, a number of conferences. And you know that I will pat you on the back and pump my fist when I completely agree with you. But if I don't, you know you're going to get the straight take from me. Okay? So the straight take here.
It was the Big 8, the Big 12, the Big 10. You'd play two FCS teams to start with. And then you see what the FCS or the SEC is doing, I don't know, the last 5 years. FCS conference, and then FCS scrubs towards the end that gets them into the I don't know, what do you call it? Into
the playoff?
Yeah, into the playoff, because they play scrub teams. Just my thing I keep throwing back at you, and I know you totally agree with me, but I just started watching you, and I jumped right on it, and I wanted to be the first one to throw it out there and slam it to everybody.
All right, Tom. So you're definitely right in that we agree on that point, that I don't like watching most of the SEC play FCS opponents the week before the rivalry games near the end of November, that they basically take a week off of college football to say, oh, we're going to play scrimmage games so we can prepare for our rivalry games. Okay? I completely agree with you. I don't like it, but that doesn't discount the dominance otherwise. So listen to me, Navy Thomas. If we listed, okay, who would you think to be the best conference in college football right now?
I'd have to go back to Big Ten.
Okay,
honestly.
Big Ten. Okay, so just about
because
anybody.
They play their wussies in the start, and then they go in the conference, and then they go from there, and there ain't no FCS towards the end of the seasoning. So that's just my point. Even the Pac-10 doesn't do that. The Big 12 doesn't do that. It just,
so Navy
all you got to do is look at the schedule.
So Navy Thomas, listen to this though. And I think really the Big Ten would be the only conference that would have any semblance of an argument in this. There's no question that the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12 cannot compare to the SEC right now. The Big Ten has some semblance of an argument. However, if we want to look at who the two conferences play out of conference, let's take last season. If I made for you a list of all the good teams, the quality teams that the Big Ten defeated last year, and I compared that to a list of all the quality opponents that the SEC defeated, those lists would not compare.
Well, in my opinion, the ACC doesn't apply into this.
I'm not talking about the ACC. I'm talking about the SEC. So off the top of my head, I'm going to list the quality non-conference opponents that the Big Ten defeated last year, okay? You've got Iowa State. You've got Auburn. You've got Wake Forest. You've got Cincinnati, Pitt, Memphis. And I pretty much hit the end of the line right there. Okay?
I'm not worried to fight with anybody. I just wanted to throw that right out there because everybody should be seeing what's going on, what the SEC keeps doing, where they shift into the FCS in November, late November, December. And that's the thing that irritates my beard.
I know you don't like that, but still, the entirety of the football season has to be taken into account, not just who the teams are playing the next to the last week of the season.
So anyway, I'm glad just to be able to get the first call in to throw that out there to argue the entire thing and. Thanks for having the video tonight. I'm real glad for it. So thank you, sir.
I enjoy the call-in shows more than anything else. This is the reason I do this more than anything else. Tom, you have a great night. I appreciate the call.
All right, my friend. Good night.
Press 1 to start the call or 2.
All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, it's Rick in Carroll City, Florida.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
Great having a chance to talk to you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks so much for calling. I believe this is your first time, correct?
This is my first time I had a chance to call in.
Nice.
While I listened to the shows, of course, with the University of Miami, and just wanted to get a chance to talk some college football with you on a Sunday evening.
Excellent. What's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to talk about, when you look at all the programs that had kids drafted the past couple of days, what are the top programs you think, the blue book programs that really you were expecting more kids to be drafted in the past couple of days? Any programs in particular that were at this point that weren't represented as well as you might have thought of for this year's draft?
So there are certainly underrepresented programs in regards to what we would expect them to produce, namely Texas and Florida State and USC come to mind, but they didn't underperform based on what we expected going into the NFL draft. Based on what we expect out of those programs, the NFL products produced by, again, Florida State, Texas, Miami, and USC has been down considerably in recent years and was this past weekend.
And it's funny that you mentioned that those specific programs are down, but look at all the other programs, these small Division I programs, some FCS schools, a couple of D2s. Look at all the kids that were drafted from those programs. And I think what you're finding is, based on all the opportunity to evaluate kids with everything that's available in today's world, it's a lot easier to find these kids. And I think that's why you're seeing 2 kids from Charlotte being drafted, 2 kids from FIU being drafted, and a kid from FAU being drafted. Those things just weren't happening 15 years ago, 10 years ago. I'm wondering if basically what we're seeing is the premier kids that are 5 stars and 4 stars. Those are the obvious kids. But it comes down to, in today's college football world, how well, how good is your staff at developing talent? So when we see 6 or 7 kids from Michigan being drafted in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, that's surprising to me. Those kids normally are developed and coached. But I think the game has changed so much based on what you can do offensively, what you can do defensively, that the developmental part is being ignored, and it's just plug and play your horses and go. And I think it's an indictment on college football in terms of what they're doing at the highest level in terms of development. Kids are not peaking at 16, 17 and are parade All-Americans, 5-star kids anymore. Those kids continue to go for the most part. And we're not seeing the 2- and 3-star kids that these programs would take in the past. Take a couple of them, and they would develop, and we're not seeing that. But we are seeing it from the Sun Belt teams, from the MAC teams, from the Eastern Shore program. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that? What's going on at this level?
So basically, you're telling me that out of, let's say, the top 25 type programs, that you're not seeing 2- and 3-stars developed that are drafted.
Correct.
Well, we also have to understand
kids developed at that level.
We also have to understand that out of 85 scholarships, if we took Clemson, for example, there aren't any 2-stars on the roster. There are, I would be guessing, 15 to 20 3-stars on the roster, and the rest are 4- and 5-stars on a Clemson roster. Something in that range. I would have to run the numbers, but I'm not discounting what you're saying. I'm not disregarding it, but I don't have the numbers in front of me. It seems like a perception, but we would need the data to really know if that's the truth.
Yeah, it's something that Gil Brandt was talking about yesterday on his show, and he mentioned that what you're seeing is the developmental component. And that's when a kid like who went to App State, the running back who was drafted, I think, in the 4th round yesterday. Sure. His measurables, he was a 2-star, his measurables were not very good. The linebacker, his measurables weren't very good either. But in 4 years, those kids developed, and their best football was ahead of them. And for the most part, you see these big programs, they're taking the premier 5- and 4-star kids. A lot of those kids from what we're understanding, is they kind of peaked a little bit. They're older kids. Some of them are really kids that are graduating a year after they should have graduated, based on whatever issues they've had. So you're starting to see this trend of the mid-conferences, of the mid-majors, that are able to get a couple, 4 or 5 kids that are athletic, that maybe they haven't been coached up that well, they haven't grown, they haven't really hit their main growth spurt, and they're developing those kids. And those kids, the Charlottes of the world and the App States, they're starting to produce kids every year. The Marshalls are starting to put kids out there every year. And when you look at a program like our program here in South Florida, Miami, you've got primarily a lot of 3-star kids. You look at the last 3 classes, it's almost about 25-30%. And of that group, very little being developed to the point where they're getting drafted or they're signing, undrafted free agent contracts. Florida State had 1 kid drafted yesterday.
Sure.
I mean, something's going on in this state. Something's going on up at Michigan. People are normally, you're taking 10, 12 kids every year that should be drafted at a certain level. You rarely see all these kids being drafted in Michigan so low.
Yeah, well, if I'm following you, we also need to understand that we're not going to see hardly any 4 and no 5 stars come out of the group of 5 and be drafted because they don't have any of those kids on the roster. I'm looking at the recruiting rankings from 2020 right here, and there are hardly any schools in the group of 5 that have any 4-star recruits. I don't see any. So if they don't sign any 4-star players, they're not going to produce any NFL players that are 4 stars. They're going to produce all 3 and 2 stars. So all the prospects that go through an FIU or an FAU are going to be 2 and 3 stars to the NFL.
And are those kids that really just haven't hit their main growth spurt? They haven't been coached up. I mean, they're making their ceiling hasn't been met yet. So those kids are being developed. Why aren't we seeing the kids that are 3-star kids or some of these 4-star kids develop at these programs? I mean, if you're that much better, if the kid was a 2-star compared to a kid who was a 4-star and they graduated in 2016, and that kid the 4-star kid doesn't even get invited to be an undrafted free agent to some of these camps. And a 2-star kid gets drafted in the 4th round. We're seeing more and more of those kids come up. And I think that's what's starting to happen now is the playing field is starting to even out where if you can play, the NFL is going to find you. Sure. And if you go to a program where there's some good coaching that they're going to be able to get the best out of you, you still have a chance to play in the National Football League. And I think that's changed from where we were about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, especially.
Well, there's no question that there are far more schools today that have the facilities and put the money into the football program to develop the players than did 20 years ago. So at a school like FAU or FIU, they have better facilities than their counterparts did 20 years ago. To develop these kids and to give them the weight training and the nutritional plan and develop them as football players on the field with quality coaching. And there's so many more camps these kids go to as young football players as they're growing up and getting into high school than was the case years and years ago. The other reason you're going to see a lot more busts at the major schools, fill in the blank, Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, etc., is that they've got layers and layers. Take a position like offensive line or linebacker where there's just, 11 and 12 and 14 players on the roster at that position. Well, they've got that roster layered with 4-star athletes. 5 stars those are very uncommon athletes. There's only about 40 per season. But there's tons of 4 stars, and that's the high end of the spectrum. Therefore, they can't all get on the field. So many of them are going to be busts because they weren't able to get on the field at a school like the ones we're talking about, the top of the line. So they're going to be busts.
And the opportunity that these kids have now, well, after 2 years, because there was 12 guys in front of you or 10 guys in front of you, let me transfer to App State. Let me transfer to FIU. Let me transfer to FAU. Let me transfer to Charlotte. And all of a sudden, they get coached up and they play there. They're there for 3 years. They've got the opportunity there to grow, is what I'm trying to point out. They have the opportunity there to actually, based on their athletic ability, stand out over the crop of kids that were brought in before. So the transfer portal, it's created a lot of problems for coaches, but it's also helped a lot of kids be able to go into a situation, develop, and have a chance to play on Sundays.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Rick. Anything else on your mind?
Last thing I want to talk to you about, I know it's early, it's, we're almost at the end of April here, but how do you see the pandemic impacting the start of the fall? Do you see us starting the fall either on schedule or close to the time frame that we normally play, or do you see us still in doubt like most people are? We don't know what this virus is still going to do. And with that in mind, we just have to go ahead and take it, almost day by day and week by week in terms of planning for the future.
So anything that I comment on here, Rick, understand that I do it in all humility, knowing that I'm no expert in any way, shape, or form, that I'm just trying to use common sense and make some reasonable projections. Let's understand that a month ago, when it was mid to late March, the model was telling us that the worst of this was going to hit around Easter. Well, we are now 2 weeks past Easter, and right now, I think just in the last few days, we've hit our worst numbers in regards to both the cases compiled each day and the deaths, unfortunately, compiled each day. We're right now, hopefully, at the peak, and we'll be descending fairly soon. So we're already into May, basically, and I just think that it's going to be difficult, although, so for example, I know that one coach, and I don't want to try to guess who it was because I don't recall, but it was a Power 5 coach, determined that he felt as though from a football program standpoint that he would need 3 to 4 weeks prior to the start of fall camp to prepare the football team. So we typically get on the field on August 1st, and therefore he's talking about the first week of July, roughly, that the program would need to be in place on campus, ready to roll, and preparing all that needs to be prepared for the influx of the student athletes. So that is now, we're looking at just over 2 months away. Yeah, these kids are going to have to be tested. And I think the major crux in all of this, the major challenge, is that it's not an even problem. It's not an evenly distributed problem across the country. It's not like everybody's at a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10 or a 6. Well, some areas are at an 8.5 and other areas are at a 2.5. And everybody needs each other to play competitive football. The Big Ten can't go forward and then say, well, Rutgers is in a really bad area, and so is Maryland. Therefore, we're going to have difficulty getting them on the playing field, so the rest of the league will play. I just don't really see that happening. And the same thing in the SEC with LSU being where it's located. That's the unevenness of the severity of this problem, I think, is going to be the difficulty.
Well, when I saw it, I believe it was early last week, that Boise State had put pretty much their entire athletic department on furlough. That really made me concerned as to if a major Division I program. Okay, I mean, I know they're not Power 5, but they're still a very quality program with an outstanding record over the last 20 years. If a program like that is doing that, how is it going to impact the smaller schools, the D3s, the D2s, the Sun Belt teams, or the Conference USA teams? How is that going to impact them? And then I saw last week also, I believe, Urbana, which is a D2 school, in Ohio pretty much shut everything down because there's so much uncertainty that financially they can't keep up because it's hard to be, payroll if you don't have, or be funded if you don't have a secure understanding of what's about to happen. So I'm starting to get a little concerned as we're getting closer to May that we still don't know what we need to know in terms of where this thing is headed. Now, I know the virus is going to pretty much dictate how things go, and we can just try to do certain measures, as they mentioned, to help mitigate things and to keep it somewhat in control. But for the most part, we haven't opened up yet. And even though we're taking measures across the country to slowly open up in certain states, how that impacts athletics, how that impacts college football, I still don't think anybody has a clue as to where we're going.
Yeah, and the other thing to consider, Rick, is obviously everybody has a different perspective on what's important here. I don't think we can, any of us that are reasonable and sensible and sensitive to the situation are talking about lives. Lives are most important. But in regards to trying to balance out the risk and the severity versus the economic impact and the way it's impacting people's lives in terms of their livelihood, what you're talking about with Boise State, there has to be some judgment call made there. So typically what happens in an emergency or urgent situation like this is somebody takes a lead, and it's going to be very interesting to see who that school is, who that conference is that's going to take a lead and try to make a decision based on the numbers that are coming back, based on their own situation, to say, hey, this is the plan we're going to put in place, and they'll need cooperation, but somebody takes the lead on that. And so some are going to be apt to be more aggressive to say, hey, we need to get on the field and we need to get this going, and we'll try to put all the safety measures in place, but we need to get this going. And others will be more apt to say, hey, let's make sure that we're in a really safe place before we move on this. And there's going to be internal struggles within conferences, within own football programs.
Well, and I think that's going to be predicated on the leadership at the top of each particular school in which state they resided. So if the governor of state XYZ says, we're not doing anything, you're not doing anything. If you're a private school and the governor says, hey, yeah, you can do it, who's got the liability? The private school assumes all liability there. Whereas if you're a state school, well, pretty much it's going to come out of the state's pocket if something goes wrong, because they're going to get sued. So liability, I think that's the one element that people are ignoring, as well as there's a certain level of accountability that if you require your athletes to participate, to be on campus, and you're really not totally sure it's a safe environment because we don't really know, and a kid gets sick and he perishes, that kid's life isn't coming back anytime soon after you've made that mistake of forcing them there. What Liberty did, I thought, was really eye-opening for me, that they opened the school. Certain kids went, certain kids didn't go, certain professors went, certain professors didn't go, and pretty much we haven't heard much from them the last couple of weeks as to how things are going on their campus. But I hate to think that we're going to put kids and jeopardize kids, potentially their welfare and their health, and those of their parents, because if kids go back home, well, they go back home to their parents. And one thing that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago to a good buddy of mine is, at what point do we start understanding that the revenue that we would generate as a school, it's not coming in anymore, and we've got to find an alternate source to be able to function and to keep going until we're able to come back and get that main revenue stream in. Because revenue, pretty much the ticket sales, your sponsorship, that's what allows you to operate day in and day out. The big money that you get at the end, the conference championships, all those things, that's what you get at the end, and that helps you get started for the following year. So that cycle has been so drastically disrupted that we're so eager to get these kids back on campus, and I hope we don't have some of these schools forcing kids to come back. And until we have a pretty good idea as to how safe we are, if we've got a vaccine, if we have whatever measures we can take on a daily basis to ensure the safety of these kids. Because once one kid gets it, it's going to spread like it always does. And those uncertainties really really have me concerned right now as to the future of fall sports and all sports in general. But I will say that what surprised me, I read this morning, was the NBA is going to start opening their facilities on Friday, May 1st.
Yes.
Not for collective or group activities, but for individual activities.
Yes.
And it'd be interesting to see what measures, what practices they are going to share with the public in terms of ensuring a safe environment for everyone that's associated, that's either employed there or associated with that, whatever facility they have, whatever they function. So I'm hoping that that's going to be the first major body in the state that gives an idea as to, hey, maybe we're going to go with these practices, and maybe we can all learn from that and somehow implement them in our prospective schools. But it's a start at least, Mark. It's a good start, though, I think.
Yeah, and some of the comments you made trigger a few thoughts. One being that, we're just thinking about the football players themselves, and they're most important in this right now, the student athletes and the risk that they would incur. But there's a whole lot of people involved. Even if we exclude the fans and play in front of empty stadiums, there are all sorts of people that have to be involved to run a football program and to run a football team. It's not just, okay, we got 10 coaches and we got our football players and we're going to play the other guys and, find an empty stadium and let's play. No, there's a lot more to it. Now, without the fan experience and the stadium experience, certainly less people are needed, but there are still periphery people that are needed within the football programs to field football teams and to run a football game site, and they have to be taken into consideration. I would think, Rick, that if there was a date that everybody had agreed on, or everybody important that's in the decision-making process, and I'll just throw out a date, on September 1st, everybody can go to camp, and we're shooting for October 1st, or whatever Saturday that is, to be week 1 of the college football season, that once those players, all the players at Kansas State University are on campus, there will be almost a lockdown effect that for the football season, these football players will be living together, practicing together. They'll all be tested to start. So that determination will be made. Okay, they're all tested. They're all clean, let's say. And they're all going to eat together, dorm together, travel together, play football together. And this is what life's going to be from October 1st until the end of the season. And they're going to be tested on a regular basis, and they're going to be in contact only with themselves in a quarantined sort of manner.
The essential workers that are involved with, let's say, a college football team or a women's volleyball team coming up now in fall, all those individuals, they're going to have to assume that same type of quarantine lifestyle, yes, away from their families, possibly. So the impact, there's so much that we haven't even thought about. To plan for it, I think, is going to be a major challenge, and to get a consensus in each, not just for every conference, but within every school. The best practices the football program is using might not work out for the volleyball. They might not have enough resources to be able to have all their fall sports running at the same time. They might have to cut a sport to be able to have football operating because they don't have enough people. There's so many challenges that are coming.
Yeah, and for as smart as some of the people involved are, there are going to be challenges that we aren't foreseeing right now, and they're not foreseeing either, even.
Absolutely. What if the state of the kid that's coming here from Houston, De'Aaron King, what if we're on lockdown still in Florida, but Texas is open? Can he apply to transfer back to Houston to finish out his last, because Houston's allowed to play? There's so many things that might come from this. So I think the most important thing is for us to be able to reach a consensus in terms of the NCAA first and foremost, and then be able to make a plan for each conference, and then within each conference, every school, And I think the first opportunity to learn from is going to be what the NBA is doing right now. So hopefully we're able to get this thing under control and get our kids back on campus and get college football running again in the fall. Mark, great to get a chance to speak with you. Thank you so much for taking my call tonight, and take care and be safe, my friend.
Appreciate that, Rick. Same to you.
Take care.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we love each and every day. We had a conversation with Mike McDaniel from SI.com this afternoon concerning Virginia Tech football. I'll be looking out for those videos. They would have already been downloaded and then edited and uploaded by myself, but YouTube a bit slow in regards to the downloading process. So I've not been able to download our conversation, so I've been able to not upload. All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line? Hello? Oh, we've got an issue with the speaker not showing up. There we go. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's McD Sports 4. How you doing?
Hey, McD, I'm doing just fine. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. I'm holding up. I want to call up because I have an idea about how I think I know how college football is going to start off. I think I know what's going to happen.
All right. You know what's going to happen? All right. Let's hear it.
I think the college football season will have this 12-game schedule with the conference championship and the playoffs and all the bowl games, but I think it's going to get pushed back 30 days. So I think you're still going to have your full season, but it's not going to start until October. And the reason why I think that is for a plethora of reasons. But the problem, here's the big problem that I think is going to be coming up with this. Some states are going to be ready to go in July, but others aren't. And I could be wrong. Maybe none of the states are ready to go in July. Maybe all the states are ready to go in July. If all the states are ready to go in July, I think the season starts normal time, and we could get about all of this stuff going on right now. But I think as of right now, you're going to see the season pushed back 30 days because it's just basically, I think that's what some people I don't think want the college football season. Like some states would prefer not for it to happen, but I think it's going to compromise and you're going to see pushed back 30 days.
Well, it sounds to me, McD, as though you've been possibly listening to an extremely smart show host.
You agree with me?
Well, that sounds exactly what I just said like 10 minutes ago. And again, I'm not pretending to say that I'm making a prediction on this. I'm just giving a scenario that the way things look right now, the way they're progressing and hopefully getting better, we seem to be at the worst in terms of the numbers, which the numbers are going to, because of the testing lag, the numbers are going to be behind the actual reality of what's happening on the streets. So I think things are getting better out there, but the numbers are basically at the peak, at the climax, hopefully, unless we have a recurrence. And therefore, I'm just kind of playing out the way the models look and the way the trends have gone in other countries, that we would probably be, if you listen to my conversation with one of the previous callers, I said the same thing in regards to hitting fall practice the first week of September and playing football the first week of October. That's just a rough projection.
I mean, and I was the one saying, like, oh, we're going to start normal time because I thought it was all going to be past us. But after reading the news the past week, I just feel like, and I mean, I don't want to go a certain route, but I just feel like there's certain states, I'm not going to say the states, but I just feel like there's certain states that are going to be very hesitant to have college football with fans in the stands, because I don't think there's going to be college football with just fans in the stands. Like, I think NFL could pull it off. I just don't think college football can. So,
What's the difference?
The difference is, I mean, I just feel like fans are a bigger part of college football than the NFL. If you ever, I mean, I'm sure you've been to college football and NFL games, but to me, whenever I go to a college football
I'm not
game,
arguing with you on that point. I'm arguing with you on the point of safety. What's the difference between having 80,000 people in a college football stadium versus 80,000 people in an NFL stadium? That's going to be the only consideration that's being made. It's not going to have anything to do with anything else that I can think of. Nothing.
And this whole thing, like, oh, we're going to have a fan sit every Thursday or every other Thursday, I think it's just ridiculous. All and none. I don't know if you heard that, but that's one thing of we can have a fan sit in every other seat. I just think that's ridiculous.
Why is it ridiculous? I understand it seems ridiculous. Okay, just because people are sitting a seat away from each other doesn't mean that when they actually get up to go somewhere, somebody's got to go to the restroom, somebody wants to go get a hot dog, that they're going to be maintaining 6 feet of distance. So you're right. It seems a bit ridiculous because not everybody's going to walk into the stadium at exactly the same time, and you're not going to walk 6 feet in front of me because then your seat is 6 feet apart from mine. And then when I say I'd like to get up and get a hot dog, you're going to say, okay, then I need to get up. And yeah, we would need an usher at every row to organize that. So I understand in terms of keeping to the guidelines that we're trying to keep to right now, it's ridiculous what you're saying. So I get that. I'm right there with you in that being ridiculous. But in terms of just keeping a general, this is a safer condition, a safer environment in general. You're going to be bumping elbows with this person and that person, but generally you're not going to be slamming elbows with 500 people during your stadium experience. It's going to be more like 20 because we are not allowing 80,000 people to fill the stadium. We're only allowing 30,000 people in the stadium. I could see that happening to some degree. There would have to be all sorts of guidelines and measures that would have to be determined, but I don't know. I could see that to a certain extent. Think about how this virus travels and the much higher propensity of people catching it packed in like sardines, 80 or 100,000 versus there being 20 or 25,000 people spread out in a 100,000 seat stadium. Sure, you still have a chance of catching it, but it is severely reduced from the situation in which you're slammed together with people breathing all over each other constantly.
I mean, that's a good point, but I mean, I heard that. I mean, it just sounds. I mean, here's another issue that I think you're going to see as well. I don't think like fans of the SEC or or other fan bases, maybe like your Texas and Oklahomas, I don't think they're really going to care about so much about safety than just going to the game. So I don't think those. I just see those games being filled.
Who's
like
making
Georgia,
the guidelines? McD, who's making the guidelines?
The state government.
The state government. The state government is making the guidelines for each state with some type of encouragement or direction from the federal government. But basically, the state governments are making the guidelines. So I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of consideration given to, oh, well, Ohio State and Penn State are playing in an extremely important game, or those are rabid fan bases, or Alabama and LSU. So we'll just let those people pack in there and watch the game. But you know that Western Michigan, Northern Illinois game doesn't really matter. So we're going to adhere to the guidelines and not let too many people get into the stadium.
Good point. Good point. But I mean, I don't know. At the end of the day, I just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, for all we know, they're playing the football season and then the spring, which I don't think they should do, by the way. I think if it comes to that, I'd rather just see them cancel it because they care so much about player safety, but then they're going to make them play 2 seasons in a year, which I think is kind of ridiculous. But I hope it's the normal start. But the more just looking at the news and stuff, the more I just feel like they're going to push it back 30 days. I mean, I hope it doesn't happen, though.
I got you, McD. Got anything else on your mind?
One other quick thing, Mark.
Okay.
Go Terps. Thanks for taking my call. Go
Terps. Maryland coming off that stellar 3-9 campaign in which McD predicted, I believe, 8-4 or 9-3 and a Big Ten championship game appearance. But as I've stated many times, we've got Michael, who's a big Purdue fan, McD rooting for Maryland. I'm trying to think anybody else. I can't think of the guy. I apologize for not remembering our UAB fan or 2. I think we've got 2 from UAB. So the lesser fan base representation, I love. You folks are true college football fans. Matthew missing the microphone with the shitty wing nut. There it is. It's still in use, but what we've done for the last several call-in shows is so that we have more even audio between myself and the caller as I bypass the mic until we get that figured out. It's 124 days until August 29th, our opening college football game, if we make it on time. I jotted down a few questions that were in the live chat. SC Tiger Fan 803 was asking me who's going to win the Heisman in 2020. I think if you're just looking at making a prediction, I would tab Justin Fields number 1 and Trevor Lawrence a close second, just like we see on the odds. So I think the odds are pretty close to what I would expect. But if you're looking for a value selection to take to Vegas with you when Vegas opens and you're allowed to make a play there. And I'm looking at the initial Heisman odds that came out about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. I think that for the Heisman Trophy, in terms of a value pick, I like Sam Ehlinger at 20-1, and also Travis Etienne at 25-1. Sam Howell at 30-1. There's a value pick for you. All right, Pinero 5 Piru talking about how the SEC and the Big Ten should play more because our topic of the night started out as SEC dominance. And as I've stated over and over and over, we don't have enough meaningful non-conference games in college football, and we need more. And I've got a plan of how to rework both the conference and the non-conference schedules that I have explained and posted in the past. Maybe I need to get it back around to that since we've got a much different audience today than we did, let's say, 3 or 4 years ago, to again unveil my conference scheduling and non-conference scheduling plan that would bring equity to college football and would improve greatly the quality of games. And especially since we don't have an objective playoff system, we need more quality games to be able to evaluate teams, not less quality games. And Jim John had asked when my conference realignment videos were going to be released. I apologize because what happened was I have them edited and posted and selected on private right now. And then the NFL draft hit us. And if you've checked out the channel in the last week to 10 days, you see that we have posted so many NFL draft videos. I wanted to focus on the NFL draft. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear as though many people cared much about the NFL draft here on the channel. So I probably put in way too much work on the NFL draft, as opposed to when I had 100 subscribers, I would post NFL draft videos, and those would be my largest watched videos of the year. I would see view totals that I hadn't seen for videos the entire year. And now that I've got just under 19,000 subscribers, I post NFL draft videos and nobody watches them. So anyway, if you want to go back and check out some analysis from Rick Saratella, NFL Draft Bible, he was on here a number of times, and we carved up the NFL draft. So what I'm getting to, Jim John, is that I did produce those videos. I'm going to release them soon, and the only reason they won't be released starting tomorrow morning is that we would like to create some fancy thumbnails to go along with those. And my son's in charge of that, and he is lagging behind. So stay tuned. Very soon, within the next few days, Jim John, we will have our conference realignment videos. Jim John would like to hear all the original SEC members. I know that Georgia Tech was there at one point up until the 50s. And of course, Texas A&M, Missouri joined in 2012. Arkansas and South Carolina joined in 1991. And prior to that, we had the same 10 teams in the SEC for a long, long, long time. I have addressed DeAndre's topic about the 1983 football season and who should have won the national championship. That was the year, of course, that Nebraska had that stellar all-time team that lost to Miami in the Orange Bowl 31-30 on a failed two-point conversion. And we had 5 teams finish with 1 loss. Miami finished number 1, Nebraska 2, Auburn 3, Georgia 4, and Texas 5. I have taken my notes, and I will be producing a video addressing the 1983 season and who should have won the national championship. So the topic on the live stream is SEC dominance. I am going that route because of what we just witnessed over the weekend at the NFL draft. Over the first 4 rounds of the draft, over the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft this season, the SEC produced 40 draft selections. 40. The Big Ten was second with 17. Then came the Pac-12 with 12, the Big 12 with 10, and the ACC with 8 draftees in the first 4 rounds. 8. I did not run the numbers for the rest of the draft, so I compiled those numbers for the first 4 rounds of the draft. I've not seen the total numbers except for the SEC had 63 drafted players and the Big Ten was second with 48. But to put it in fair context, we have to give weight to first rounders and then less to second rounders, third rounders, and down the line. You can't just say 63 from the SEC and 48 from the Big Ten and leave it right there. There has to be weight given, of course, to the quality of the draft, the quality of the draft selection. So the SEC, by any weight and measurement, dominated the NFL draft. The Big Ten started to catch up, but those were with later round selections. On the field, the SEC is playing the best football. So right now, only the Big Ten can challenge the SEC in regards to money, television ratings, and rear ends in the seats. I state this all the time when talking about the real power brokers in the sport. The SEC and the Big Ten when it comes to attendance, television ratings, and money generated, revenue. Those two own the sport. But if you take it on the field and look at the results, then the SEC distinguishes itself from the Big Ten. The Big Ten would be the only conference, I believe, right now here in 2019 going into 2020's play that could have any type of stretched argument to debate that the SEC is not number one. So from the time that the collegiate athlete begins his career until they join the NFL, basically what we see is that the South, and specifically Florida, Texas, and California, produce the most college football players and the best college football players. The most quantity, the largest quantity of quality are produced in those three states. Typically, right around 40% of college football players in the Power Five are produced by California, Texas, and Florida. Now that the SEC has one of its stronger members in Texas, that's one of the big reasons why the SEC brought in Texas A&M. They are now fortified in the state of Texas. Per capita, Louisiana then comes into play as the strongest high school football playing state per capita in producing college football players and also NFL players. So that's one place to evaluate it. Who's bringing in the best talent? The SEC is. Go by any measurement. We can look at Rivals, ESPN, 24/7's top 300 players, top 500 players. The SEC is bringing in the most. And then there's a pretty good wrestling match between the Big Ten and the ACC, with the Pac-12 and the Big 12 especially falling behind. Then on the end of the career, as the players leave after their junior or senior years going into the NFL, we saw this past weekend that the SEC for the 14th consecutive year had the most drafted players. That can't be argued. To what degree the SEC dominates in NFL products, we can argue that, but it's number one. We can't argue that. Okay, then the most important part of that is not how much talent comes into college football or how much talent leaves college football, but what are the results on the field? For this past season, the SEC played the best football. The SEC won the championship, which I have already argued in past years hasn't been the best or most quantifiable or relevant result is the actual championship, because a number of factors go into who competes for a national championship, who is chosen to compete for a national championship. But LSU did arrive to the college football playoff and disposed of two rather strong teams, especially Clemson, in pretty convincible fashion, in annihilation fashion against Oklahoma. And then they certainly took out Clemson by 17 points as well. And then on down the line, the SEC basically had a few embarrassments, the likes of Tennessee losing to Georgia State, Missouri losing to Wyoming. Arkansas has been an embarrassment for 3 years now, just overall an embarrassment against anybody they play. But other than those few slip-ups, consider who the SEC played and defeated non-conference this year. Clemson, Oklahoma, Texas, Michigan, Oregon, Notre Dame, Baylor, Virginia, Miami, Florida State, no big deal there, but still, Florida State, Miami. Virginia Tech, also defeated by the SEC. Indiana, an 8-4 team out of the Big Ten. So yeah, if we took the teams that were defeated and were lost to, the wins and the losses for each conference of quality opponents by any measurement, the SEC wins that battle in 2019. The SEC won the national championship from 2006 through 12, 7 consecutive national championships. I argued at the time that while the SEC was the best conference, that dominance was skewed by being given the leeway into the national championship round more than any other conference. So it's difficult to lose a national championship in 2011 when you have both teams in the national championship game. And it's also much easier to compete for national championships and win a national championship when you've got a team placed in the BCS championship game every year. That wasn't the case with the other conferences. So while the SEC took advantage of being a regular participant in the BCS championship game, to its credit, the other conferences did not get that same privilege or advantage. And I would argue, we could go year to year in college football, and I would argue during the era of the BCS that there were other teams left out of the BCS championship game that had just as good a resume as the teams that were selected. All right. Then once we had a different team, Florida State, 2013, win the national championship, the SEC leveled off. Coaching deteriorated. A lot of good coaches left the conference. A lot of good coaches went to other conferences, James Franklin being a good example, going from Vanderbilt, where he won 9 games at Vanderbilt 2 consecutive years, going to Penn State, and then Penn State suddenly being better in 2016 and winning the Rose Bowl, or going to the Rose Bowl and winning the Big Ten championship than they had been going back to 2008 and 9. So Penn State was the best program and the best team it had been in 7 or 8 years, and that was just one example. So teams elevated in the Big Ten. Penn State, Michigan State were the best examples, and Ohio State, of course, in winning a national championship. And programs leveled off because of decreased quarterback play in the SEC and good coaches leaving the league. Tennessee slumped. Ole Miss eventually, post-Hugh Freeze, slumped. LSU slumped, not from a talent perspective, but losing 3 to 4 games a year after being a top 5 to 10 team from the time Nick Saban really got it rolling in 2001, all the way up until losing the BCS championship game in 2011. From 01 to 11, LSU was a major player in college football. And then post-2011, from 2012 through 18, LSU, good team, a lot of talent, a lot of NFL players, but 9-3, 8-4 every year. So LSU, no longer a factor for those 7 or 8 years. Tennessee, no longer a factor. Florida, through much of that time, not a factor. Auburn, hit or miss. The only consistent component, obviously, was Alabama, and then Georgia came on. So it could be argued from 2013 up until the last couple of years that maybe the Big Ten had matched the SEC or overtaken the SEC as the best conference. And for one lone year, 2016, it could be argued that the ACC was the best conference. But based on the results we saw this past season, and even though Alabama was ambushed and embarrassed in 2018 in the national championship game, it's difficult to argue in 2018. And then combining that with the talent that's coming into the conference and leaving the conference and showing itself in the NFL draft, it is difficult to argue SEC dominance, and that the SEC might be as dominant today as it was between 2006 and 2012 in winning 7 consecutive national championships. Snake Spencer is telling us that the Big Ten East is the second best division in college football. That would be to the SEC Western Division. I believe that to be true. I will say that the leveling off of Michigan State, of which I don't see a rebound anytime soon, will hurt that division immensely. And basically just the presence of Ohio State makes that a true statement. Because the Big Ten Western Division, with the ascension of Minnesota and with Wisconsin and Iowa playing solid football and a potential of Nebraska, I know it's only potential, that the Western Division may soon be as good, if not better, than the East, and it becoming more of an issue in the Big Ten that Ohio State has separated itself from the rest of the conference. That's already happened. Oh, Dennis, I'm so sick of these SEC lovers. See, this is the deal here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We tell it like it is. We tell it like it is. So for a number of people out there that have criticized me for being a Big Ten or an Ohio State homer, I am sitting here tonight, as I have done many times in the past, and stated that the SEC is the best conference because we tell it like it is. I will see if we've got anything else left in the live chat. If not, I'm certainly here to take calls at 860-325-3687. David is telling us that he thinks the Big Ten was better overall conference in 15, 16, and 17. And I think that's debatable. I think it's a decent point. I don't think it's a joke, your statement, David. I think it's reasonable. I don't necessarily think it's true. I would have to comb through those years again and really look at it. In 2015, Alabama pasted Michigan State in the college football playoff 38-0. Michigan State fairly won the Big Ten and earned a right to the college football playoff. But anybody that understands football, knows and watches it, knows that Ohio State was the best team in the Big Ten, maybe the best team in the country, certainly by most measurements, the most talented team in the country. And an Alabama-Ohio State matchup in 2015, that's what college football needed. They didn't need to see Alabama whip up on Michigan State. We needed to see the defending champion Ohio State team from 14 play an Alabama team that would eventually win the national championship in 15. We needed to see those two teams go at it, but we were unfortunately robbed of that based on Ohio State, and to Michigan State's credit, blowing a game in Columbus on the final play on a last-second field goal to Michigan State, and also that because the Michigan punter, it's a good thing I don't remember his name, the Michigan punter in 2015 against Michigan State didn't just drop the ball. So Michigan's winning. I forget the final score of that game. Michigan's winning by like 4 points. Michigan's winning by 4 points. 23-20. I believe 23-20. Does that make sense? Anyway, Michigan has the ball, 4th down, winning by 3 or 4 points, 5 or 6 seconds on the clock. All they have to do is execute the snap of the punt and catch the ball. They don't even have to punt the ball. Just fall on the ball and the game's over. Just fall on it and the game's over. But the kid whirls around, throws the ball up in the air, a la Garo Yepremian, and Michigan State runs it for a touchdown and wins the Big Ten championship. That's what it came down to. So long story short, David, I get your point on 15, 16, and 17. Again, I'd have to really grind down and compare those conferences. And if it would get enough views, which it won't, I would cut a video comparing the Big Ten and the SEC for 2015, 16, and 17. And I would throw the ACC in for 2016, producing a national championship team in Clemson, producing a 10-3 bowl record, including a Florida State win over Michigan in the Orange Bowl. So the ACC was right there in the argument for 1 year, and now the ACC's trash. Awful. Awful. What's ironic about that Ohio State situation in 2015 in losing the Big Ten Eastern Division based on Michigan State pulling off that miracle at the Big House and the Michigan punter throwing the ball up in the air like a knucklehead, is that Alabama made it to Atlanta and the SEC championship game in similar fashion. They needed a miracle. Ole Miss beat Alabama. Had Ole Miss defeated Arkansas, both Ole Miss and Alabama would have finished at 7-1, and since the Rebels beat the Tide head-to-head, they would have gone to the SEC championship game. But in stepped Alex Collins and Hunter Henry in an overtime game at Arkansas, and fill in the blank for me if you guys remember this play, because this is one of the craziest plays in college football. Not the same week, but within the same 2 to 3 week time frame. Ole Miss is about to win an overtime game against Arkansas. They scored the points on the first possession to take like a 50-44 lead, whatever the score was. Arkansas has the ball. They get stuffed the first 3 plays. It's a 4th and 20. And Arkansas, I'm trying to think of their quarterback's name. The kid whose brother also played the same position at Arkansas. Man, this was only 5 years ago, and I already forget. I've seen the kid play about 8 million times. Anyway, the quarterback at Arkansas at the time, Allen. Drew Allen, not Drew Allen. Anyway, completes the pass on 4th and forever to Hunter Henry, who's about to step out of bounds. But if he steps out of bounds, it's only like a 10-yard completion, so the game's going to be over. Flips the ball over his head. Now, actually, that was a smart play because the game was going to be over, as opposed to the Michigan punter who threw the ball up in the air, because all he did is win the game for Michigan State. Hunter Henry throws the ball over his head backwards. It falls on the ground. There's a big pile up to recover the football. Out steps Alex Collins with the ball. He runs for the game-winning touchdown. I don't know if you guys remember that, but that was the play that defeated Ole Miss, knocked them out of the SEC championship game, sent Alabama to the SEC championship game in 2015, and allowed them to win the SEC and go to the college football playoff. On the flip side, a game at the Big House involved Michigan State getting a gift miracle touchdown off a Michigan punter, just completely losing his mind, that sent Michigan State to the Big Ten championship game and eventually the college football playoff, and not Ohio State. Of course, the Buckeyes only have themselves to blame for not making the playoff that year and losing to Michigan State. $503305 podcast. These conferences always change. 25 years ago, it was the Big 8 and the Southwest Conference. then a something joins the SEC, Texas A&M, I guess. It's all ring around the rosy. David, until the Big Ten gets Nebraska and the team up north playing at a higher level, the Big Ten will never have a chance to catch the SEC. The only programs playing at top 10 level, Ohio State and Penn State, where you could argue in the SEC, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, LSU, of course, this past season. Now, let's hang on with LSU just a bit. It was one season. It was a huge season. It wasn't like they just jumped up and went 10-2 and won a bowl game, and wow, they showed us something one year. No, they won the national championship and dominated, but they haven't played at that level. I would like to see LSU, if we're going to call them truly, like when somebody asks me who's elite, I know to answer Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State. Then I say we've got question marks about Oklahoma, Georgia, and LSU being elite. But those would be the 6 teams that there's at least an argument. I would say that there are no other arguments out there. You can't argue that Oregon or Texas or Michigan or Penn State or Notre Dame or Florida is elite. No, they're not elite. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, I don't think there's any question. Georgia, LSU, Oklahoma, we can have the argument. And to David's point, that would mean that Alabama is definitely elite, and LSU and Georgia are basically elite, and Florida's on the way, it appears, as opposed to in the Big Ten, just Ohio State being there, and Penn State and Michigan need to show up. And Nebraska wouldn't hurt, although I think I've got a video in the works right now. When is Nebraska going to be Nebraska again? When is USC going to be USC again? Interesting question. Blue blood. So the only distinction I'll make between elite and blue blood is that, and somebody's going to correct me in here, and that's fine, because I may not get this completely correct, but the term blue blood speaks to royalty, and royalty doesn't change. So if you were originally a blue blood, you're going to be a blue blood, and then you can't play yourself into being a blue blood. So you have to originally be a blue blood. Now, in college football, we don't mean originally, because then that would be Yale and Lehigh and Rutgers and Princeton. You know, at some point in the 20s, 30s, 40s, when there was some semblance of organization in the sport. I made this statement, Snake Spencer 725, a couple weeks ago when I was asked about blue bloods, and I more choose to use the term elite, all-time elite program. So Clemson is an elite program right now, no question. Clemson is not an elite program all time. Yet, they continue this, let's have the discussion in 5 years. But all time, the elite programs are Notre Dame, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, Oklahoma, USC. Those are my elite programs all time. And then I've got 2 on the periphery that I have no issue with anybody. I will not argue with anyone, specifically if they throw in Nebraska and Penn State. Those 2 I will allow definitely in the conversation. Nebraska and Penn State, elite right this second. Again, I'm going Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, with certainly an argument to Georgia, LSU, and Oklahoma. More so Georgia and LSU. Oklahoma needs to show that it's going to be competitive against the other elite teams in the playoffs. And they did so for the 1 year with Baker Mayfield at the Rose Bowl against Georgia, taking the Bulldogs to overtime. Jordan letting us know that the founding members of the ACC are Clemson, Duke, Maryland, North Carolina State, South Carolina, and Wake Forest. Team of the 80s and team of the 90s. I tend to think that Miami was the team of the 80s. They won national championships in 83, 87, and 89. They came close to winning national championships in 85 and 86 and 88. They were elite from 1980 on. Basically, they nobody gave them much attention until 1983, and they pulled off the miracle against Nebraska. But then they continued on through the 80s, and they were in the top 5 to 10 in the nation every year. And again, 3 national championships. One could be disputed, 1983, but they could also argue that they were right there to win another national championship in either 1985, 86, or 88. Team of the 90s, and Florida State certainly was there in the 80s, but more so past about 86. They were solid the first half of the decade, but really came on as a power the last half of the decade. Auburn's a good choice in the 80s, but I think Miami's pretty clearly the team of the 80s. Oklahoma and Nebraska
Start at the beat.
were extremely strong through much of the 80s as well. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, who's on the line. And for the 90s, we'd go Nebraska, and then we'll dig into that a little bit further. Yeah, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Nate. Sorry, my home phone wasn't responding well, so it's Nate.
All right, Nate. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. What's up?
I'm just stopping by to say hi, and I was asking myself if someone from Big Ten, could Oklahoma? This is my question from the Big 12 to the Big 10. Could Oklahoma, if this makes sense, could Oklahoma join the Big 10 because of the geography wise and stuff? Join the Big 10 to renew rivalry for Nebraska and stuff? Or
Well,
would
anything's
that
possible.
be-
Nebraska joined the Big Ten. Oklahoma could join the Big Ten. I don't see it happening, but certainly out of the 5 major conferences, the Big 12 has been the closest one to disbanding in the past. When they lost Nebraska and Colorado, there was some thought that there would no longer be a Big 12. So who knows what's going to happen in the future. But geographically, it somewhat works that Oklahoma would join the Big Ten, but I don't have any other reason to believe that Oklahoma is going to leave the Big 12 right now.
Oh no, I'm just asking if they for example, if they would. So yeah, that's my question, and that's all I got. So take care, Mark, and have a good night.
All right, Nate. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking it down each and every Sunday night for our call-in show. We appreciate all of you guys making this happen. And keep in mind that we've got live streams coming your way almost every day. So if you've not subscribed, the reason you subscribe is to help us keep going here. So YouTube responds to people subscribing. They respond to views, of course. They respond to length of view. They respond to comments, and they respond to people that like the video. They like to see a lot of likes, a lot of comments, a lot of views, of course. And the thing that I will thank you for significantly is watching the videos for a long, long time. So the duration of time that people watch the videos here is extraordinary. So thank you so much for that, because that helps us as well. So please subscribe. That helps us build what we're trying to accomplish here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, and that's to deliver the best in discussion, debate, and analysis of college football on a daily basis. Please lock it in. Yes, Michael's got it right there. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel right here. If you subscribe, therefore, what you do is you subscribe, you turn on the bell, get the notifications. That way you know when we're going live, because the only one I'm going to guarantee each and every week, for the most part, when I say guarantee, obviously life gets in the way at times, but basically guarantee that each and every week, Sunday night at 10 o'clock Eastern time, I will be here to take your calls. Otherwise, we've got Florida State lives and Ohio State lives and Miami lives and other teams as well, Notre Dame in recent weeks, and other live streams that I like to deliver. But based on people's schedules, they're difficult to set in stone each and every week. Therefore, if you subscribe, then you get the notifications to know when we're going live. All right, everyone. Appreciate you stopping by. Hope to see you tomorrow and throughout the week here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Be looking out for those conference realignment videos. Jim John, we'll see you soon.